Hello. Hi. Welcome to Ventures and Visionaries, episode 14, Fueling Innovation, the Intersection of Venture Capital and Early Stage Startups. I'm your host, Mordy Hackel, fractional CTO, entrepreneur, coach, and mentor. This podcast is about leadership, entrepreneurship, and business innovation. How do these areas differ and contrast? How do they complement and create leverage? The podcast is sponsored by KJ Technology. Ventures and Visionaries is all about gratitude, and we are incredibly grateful to KJ for sponsoring the podcast. It is a strategic IT and cybersecurity advisory services company. We'll talk about them a little bit at the end. Welcome to the show. Today, I'm super excited to be talking to Dr. Oksana Malysheva. Dr. Malysheva is a physicist originally from the Ukraine and now living in Austin, Texas. Her professional interests are driven by her passion for leadership, mentorship, innovation, and education. Once part of the strategic teams of McKinsey and Motorola, she is now the CEO and managing partner of Sputnik ATX, and we will get into that very interesting name momentarily. And she's also a venture capitalist who's interested in elevating the trajectory of people, which is a central mission, part of her mission. Doctor, it's a pleasure to meet you and be with you and spend some time together. I'm really looking forward. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Greetings from Austin. It is nice and summery here today, which is honestly a treat, having spent a lot of time in the colder climates. And happy to chat. I think we're gonna have a great dialogue. And I'm passionate about being in a space I'm in right now. Austin, we're just at the tail end of Austin Tech and Innovation Week. It's such a great timing for this because talking about how innovation and visionaries are being grown and incubated in places that are not Silicon Valley is near and dear to my heart. And I'm looking forward to diving into all of the aspects you talk about.
Maybe so that's so timely. So maybe tell us a little bit about how Austin became such a, or maybe how you came to Austin and found it to be, or facilitating whatever it is that you think is most appropriate. And our listeners would want to know, like, what makes Austin a great incubator hub?
Yeah. Listen, I think my core belief in life that good success comes as a combination of serendipity and hard work and planning. And I think from that perspective, me being in Austin is a combination of waking up one day in Chicago thinking that I'm an entrepreneur, my family is entrepreneurial, and we could be anywhere. And Chicago, I love it with whole heart, but it was just way too cold, one too many winters. Deciding to move here and opening eyes to Austin, realizing that it is a fantastic entrepreneurial hub. And back when we moved, it was in the teens, 2016, I think, when my family moved, and 2018 is when we opened Sputnik ATX. What was interesting is there were a lot of ingredients that one could observe in the Silicon Valley. Great engineers, great cost of living. The city is small enough where people would not be snooty and will talk to each other, but big enough where you could actually get to the variety of talent. And for whatever reason, the same level of startup founding, support, investment was just not at the scale that I felt and my co-founder felt was appropriate to what could be. And betting on the fact that, and fundamentally that is a philosophy of Sputnik, that the talent is everywhere, but the opportunity is not distributed evenly. And if you bring some thoughts and ideas that have worked amazingly well in the Valley, but you bring it into what we felt was an up and coming hub, you could create great things. And that is why I believe Austin is a great place for innovation. It's a great place for new startups. It's going to be different from the Valley, but it's great. We bet on this in 2018, and then COVID happened, and I feel like half of Silicon Valley's preeminent investors moved to Austin. So really proud of calling the trend early.
Interesting. What you say is so fascinating, both in terms of the serendipity and the planning and the preparation, as well as being able to just kind of understand where things are going and look for an opportunity where people are moving into and try to see how the trend is going to ultimately lead. And I guess that kind of happens because of background. So people, obviously have a little bit of learning that happens in that process. And at the same time, it requires some deep thinking. And what I have been impressed by, one of the things that when we've spoken, Oksana, is that you spend a lot of time thinking about trends and people and how to make people successful. So maybe tell us a little bit from the background perspective, what made you move from physics and to people development and the background, and like, how'd you get into all of this? Because that's certainly
Oh, this is such a great question, because, and I particularly have a really good time thinking, how would I explain to my 20-year-old self the journey that I were about to undertake? Because truthfully, I once nicknamed myself an accidental venture capitalist. And that actually is funny to me, even because as a person in my personality, I grew up being a quintessential planner. I recognize that a little bit in my daughter, but I'm the kind of person like in this time I want to be here and then I want to be here. And I realized, looking back at my journey when I was 20, in my wildest dreams, like, I would not have envisioned being in Texas, in America, in Texas of all places, being a venture capitalist. Remember that I grew up in the former Soviet Union. And the capitalism, even the word capitalism was a dirty word when I was growing up. And to envision that I'm going to get from there to here, I dream big, but honestly, this would be schizophrenic at that moment in time, because the whole world would not have adapted that. And now let me recite the journey. So you have a Ukrainian-born trained physicist that then moved to get a PhD in physics in the United States, then moved and worked in management consulting like McKinsey, then worked at Motorola, being part of the team that launched Razor and doing some private equity turnarounds. Those were the big steps in which I traveled. In each one, I followed my passion, my curiosity at the time, as well as the people from whom I wanted to learn. Now, sitting back here, ironically, every single step that I took makes it for a really great experience to guide future entrepreneurs to make these investments. I draw on different aspects of that background at different points in time. However, I would not have never predicted that. I would have never predicted that. Yet the universe had better plans for me. So I think for those of the younger folks that are listening that are planners, by all means be planners, because I always had goals, I always had intentions for my next steps, but also have belief in yourself, but also belief in that the universe is out there happening for you, not to you, and you may not fully know where your journey would lead. Because my experiences are almost custom made to be here in this chair in a variety of different ways, but I would not have planned for that. And even looking at that, the austerity of growing up under the former Soviet Union, the shortages, the things like that, you could talk about, that's really unfortunate. But in my case, my response to that was an extreme creativity, an ability to make, like, one of my secret hidden talents, Mordy, is I could make a soup from anything that is out there in the fridge. I sometimes have done it with my friends as a challenge. That is the skill that came from not being able to cook from a cookbook to the list of ingredients or protocol, but saying, what do I want? What do I have? Let's go from here to there. Even that austerity, I would have not have picked that for my kids, where you literally have nothing in your fridge and you have to figure out what you're going to eat. You don't pick it, but actually serves you well and create, because in business, often you have to make soup of the ingredients that are in the fridge. And not being scared of that is a fun exercise.
You said so much, and I can take this conversation in probably at least a dozen different directions. One is just being able to be grateful to the gifts of the universe. And very often we don't have the ability to recognize them because they often appear disguised as something that is really not a gift, or something that we're not appreciating at that time. But then we realize just how much we truly learned and what kind of abilities. And you mentioned that about young people. I thought that was so interesting because, certainly people who are growing up in an environment of plenty versus the people who grow up in an environment of scarcity, it's inevitable that there will be a different approach. So the question is, how does one help young people think about, well, here are all the wonderful things that I had. Well, how do I take that and even multiply those? I
Yeah,
wonder if you have
no,
any thoughts about that.
listen, so true. And it comes to your mental practices, because not for 1 millisecond, I want to say austerity is great. Austerity is not necessary to move forward. What is necessary is, how does Oksana version 2.0 is better than Oksana version 1.0? Gratitude. I think my favorite American holiday, bar none, as a naturalized American, I get to examine the holidays and claim them. Bar none, it's Thanksgiving. It's non-commercial. It's about family, and it's about stating what you're grateful for. And now, like, it's fortuitous. Today is the 1st of November. We're entering into that month of gratitude. It's the month of plentifulness and the harvesting. And taking a second, what are we grateful for in the moment, in the now? Because I feel like when you practice gratitude, and they're like, we're all human. There are some days that it's more difficult to practice than some others, but coming into this with an attitude of gratitude, there's always something to be thankful for today in wherever you are, and building from there, because you cannot be creative when you're angry, but you can be creative when you are grateful. You cannot build alliance. It's easier. It's more generative to build alliances, to enter in the new directions from the position of the gratitude. I feel that, and it is a practice. It's a practice of really noting what's good about today. And it costs nothing. And you could cultivate that if you are from the position of material abundance, of position of material less than abundance. You could cultivate it from the position of opportunity abundance or opportunity scarcity, because where we start is less relevant than where we're heading. Right?
You say so much about this, and I completely agree that the attitude of abundance is much more powerful when you're trying to galvanize and develop cultures of people together, because that resonates with people. People may be motivated with the stick, but they much more appreciate the carrot and the love that's associated with it, I think.
Yeah, no, this is so true. And I think that also I love that you brought up that gratitude, because it's also redefining, because one of the ways, particularly because this is about entrepreneurs and this is for entrepreneurs. And one of the things, entrepreneurs are crazy and heroic people all at the same time. And once in a while, you run in the wall of, how do I compete against this giant? And redefining, I think, giving yourself a moment to sit in the position of gratitude will allow you to redefine the opportunity and say, do I need to compete here, or do I want to compete broader? Do I want to go after everything that everyone else is going, or is there an opportunity right next to it that people are overlooking in this moment in time? And I think that is a really useful, changing the frame through which you look at this is a great way to redefine what's possible in the now. It does not eliminate all the issues that all of us are facing at different moments in time. It could be cash constraint, it could be time constraint, it could be stress constraint. But stepping back and say, okay, this is what's great. This is what's good about this day, opens you up to see the opportunity and go there. Or even if you have to stay in the moment and grind, which also happens, you redefine your situation, you redefine your opportunity and attitude to that grind.
Yeah, it really sounds like what you're saying is that the quality of the question, which we all know is super important, is directly framed by the gratitude itself. Like, as the gratitude creates the question, it makes it all the more powerful, because it's not, oh, what don't I have so I can, grab to me and bring into my sphere, but rather, how do I think about this in a way that's more beneficent on the rest of the world? And I think that that's really interesting, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, Thank you. That's a great question. I also want to say that I think going to the kids, because being a mom of two teenagers and kind of seeing that in what's happening in the world, I think I've seen young people that are younger being guilted by the abundance they grew up in, because somewhere else in the world it's not that. And I think that also could be cured with gratitude, because I've seen people who changed, like taking from whom everything is given, a lot is expected, to not taking it as a burden, but taking it as an empowerment and channeling that, as opposed to, because it is very clear, no matter how challenged the American teenager is, there is probably a teenager in Africa that is facing a lot more challenges. And recognizing that does not mean does not make you a lesser person, the less ambitious person, like, your contributions to the world could be different. I think looking at this side by side similarly goes for, even though, let's say, American entrepreneurs are usually way more advantaged than entrepreneurs, let's say, in Peru or in Bulgaria or but the world is open for both. And I think in a way, like, these people here, like, take advantage of the largesse you've been given with joy, versus the people there, like, who told you that these limitations are set in stone? How could you step around those limitations? And I think that's where, and I think that's fine, like, where the word gratitude is a cure for both situations.
So I love that. I love it. And I'll perhaps pivot the conversation a smidge and maybe bring it back full circle in a moment. I've been listening quite a bit to another physicist who went into business, Dr. Ellie Goldratt, who was the founder of Theory of Constraints. And one of the assumptions that he makes in some of the books that he discusses on TOC is that there are no conflicts in nature. Something either weighs 2 pounds or 4 pounds. It doesn't compromise on, let's say this thing weighs 4 pounds. And he said that there's a lot of different things that come from that assumption, but physics, he said, doesn't allow for the kinds of compromise that we as people tend to employ in the system. And generally, the conflict that he discusses in his systems have to do with assumptions that we make. So where I bring this back is, as a physicist, did you find that your rigorous training on understanding nature, underlying assumptions, trying to figure out what happened, helped you figure some of these things out? And if so, like, how does one who's maybe, younger and learning and trying to figure out, like, well, I'm studying this, but I really want to do that, or maybe even I don't know what I want to do. Like, where do I go with all of that?
Oh, well, first of all, such a fun question.
Right?
Such a fun question on so many levels. And let me uncouple this. Physics, fundamentally, for me, is about studying the nature and asking, so physics is a fantastic training to do something new later in life, if you look at this way. And I went into physics early on because I love these fundamental questions about physics. And when I met people that are physicists, they were the coolest humans ever. And like, one of the really smart decisions I was making when I was deciding, because there was a fork in my career, like educational career early on, my mind maybe earlier worked more like mathematical mind. And I could have gone and pursued a degree in mathematics, a degree in physics. And one of my first learnings is, for whatever reason, I like being surrounded by physicists more. Not to diss mathematicians. I know a lot of really great mathematicians, but physics resonated more with me first, not just about science, but about people who practice that science. And that is such a great framework to hack life. Because if you are picking your next journey, not just by what you get to do, but with whom you get to do that, I think that is a really, really useful lesson. Because if you surround yourself with people that smarter than you, kinder than you, more slightly than you, whichever vector you want to develop, if you go there, you're going to grow with that group. And I think in a way, it was very intuitive when I was a 17-year-old, but it served me well as a, let's say, life hack down the road. So I think in picking physics, I picked physicists first.
So that sounds very consistent with, your entrepreneurial journey as well, meaning you're more interested in the community of the people, or maybe it sounds to me like, and maybe I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me like you're interested in the community of people around the endeavors which tend to energize you.
Very true. And I think it maybe is actually because entrepreneurs, I'm thinking whether we stay here and come back to physics for a second, because that you have a talent for asking really awesome, deep questions. So I kind of like, I'm just like, there's this tug of war happening in my head right now. Which one do I go to first? So I'm going to add one more thing about physics, and maybe we could double click on the community, because that's a huge one. The other thing about physics is physics teaches you to ask the right questions and solve them to the right degree of precision. And I had to convince myself of that. And I had to convince people that were talking to me, because while I was doing my PhD at UPenn, I fell in love in this business. And it felt to me like this illicit love affair. Because up until that moment, I was all science all the time. I didn't know the world of business existed. And now I see this management consultant, and I was like, whoa, you could do that. You could be in the best companies in US, and they're going to pay you for that. I would actually pay someone to be in that situation. That's how I felt. But there was nothing on my resume that would lead me there. And I think I credit physics, and I credit looking, because you had to strip it to the bare bones and asking the right questions about what is happening in nature, and also to which degree of precision do we need to solve it. Let me give you a story that illustrates that. When you measure in physics, the error bar on your device is mega important. And one of the things that all physicists get, that you drill that in your lab 101 probably, is that you do not need to spend time managing to a millimeter precision if you know that the error bar on your experiment is 1 meter long. And so, but if you think that your experiment will change dramatically by needing to go lower, you have to change your experiment. So if I need to measure what's the distance between Austin and Dallas, I do not need to invest time in knowing this to the millimeter. But if I'm looking into the structure of the cell, I absolutely need to find a better device. And just really understanding that fundamentally that actually applies in many things in business, because some things you need to solve up to this level. Let's say, let's go into this direction. But for instance, if you're doing compliance, there is no such thing as we are approximately compliant, will kill you with any board, right? And so really even understanding that is important.
We can approximately invest hundreds of millions of dollars to be approximately compliant.
Yeah.
I like that.
And so I think physics is going there. And I think having those two things in interviewing for consulting, rooting myself to what do I know well, because people challenge, what makes you believe you have not one iota of business experience? Why do you belong here? And said, well, let's think about this from this perspective. I have 20 years of training in posing the right question and solving them. And I think that would be useful in business. And I also know how to learn, and I've adapted my environments multitude of times. And that will, you're not being hired as a consultant to solve problems that everyone knows solution for. You're bringing your top consulting firm to push the frontier forward. And that is exactly when asking what's going on here, asking those reportedly silly questions would be very valuable. And so going into basic sciences right now in this rapidly evolving world is mega valuable, because studying nature, even if you look where we're going with AI, in a way we're going back to the basic scientific process. What do we know? What do we know? What are our error bars? Where are our data? And that maybe you're better suited in solving for that as a scientist. Alex Schultz, which is the guy, and if you guys, those of you who are in startups, if you don't know who he is, go look him up. He is the guy that I think he was a chief marketing officer, and he launched PayPal, and I think then he worked at Facebook. Mega marketing. I don't know, like Mr. would describe it. I respect him a ton as a marketer, particular marketer for startups, trained as a physicist, does not have one shred of marketing education, completely self-taught. Marketing, particular marketing for startups, is extremely well adapted to a scientific mindset. And people would rarely think about that. But that's also like where, if you're studying physics, if you're studying philosophy, Chris Dixon with Andreessen Horowitz, one of the best thinkers in the area of crypto, blockchain, digital assets, like really deep. I respect him a ton, trained as a philosopher. So you're going to go back and look at those seemingly impractical educations combined with the desire to learn, prove themselves immensely valuable down the road.
And the passion that people need to bring to the table to not only say, well, oh, I mean, everybody has imposter syndrome to some degree, I would imagine. But go back and look at what you've learned. And if you've learned true skills that are educational oriented, I mean, no one stops learning, like in our own lifetime. I mean, certainly we could talk about the generations. I'm personally a Gen Xer. So as a Gen Xer, my childhood was analog. My adolescence was hybrid, and my adulthood was digital. And, for kids today that are born into a digital world, that's a different thing. And how do you learn about learning? And how do you develop the quality? I think you spoke about this precisely correctly. How does one develop the training to think about the right kinds of questions that examine the underlying assumptions that can figure out what is going to create the next breakthrough?
Yeah, that's so true. And I think you could learn it irrespective of what were the medium, like whether you grew up writing with a fountain pen or with a iPad stylus. I think it's a curiosity to go there. What do I know? Like, what could I learn from people? I think that actually is a fundamental meta skill, because if you think about this, I share, like, listen, when I was in grad school, the email was still a novelty. The fact that you write to someone, like, I remember calling my parents in their first year in the United States, and the phone call was $3 an hour, but $2.50 if you do this between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And so for me, that was a meaningful difference. So I would choose to wake up at that point in time to talk to my parents, and now look all the things we have. But fundamentally, whether you could have a really great analog phone conversation, you could have a meaningless multi-hour Zoom where you have all the modern audio video things available to you. And so it's about, what is it about, like, maybe less than how it's delivered.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe tell us a little bit about Sputnik and how you got to stand that up, and what are you doing, and what are the innovations that you're currently focused on?
Yeah. So Sputnik ATX, think of us as a kindergarten for future unicorns that are not based in the Silicon Valley. I love the Valley. I think they've got a lot going for them. But my observation as a physicist, that's going back to asking basic questions, why not here? And what can we do to step up and just create a Silicon Valley level talent in the places that are not necessarily Silicon Valley? And that's where I saw an opportunity to get, when we first opened Sputnik. The anchoring back, opportunity is everywhere. Talent is everywhere. Opportunity is not evenly distributed. And that goes for knowledge. If you think about this, asking fundamental question, we expect startup people to change the world, but we under-explain what specifically that entails. Most of the things that you do at the early stage startup, the things you do at the takeoff of the company, are dramatically different than what you do when the company is cruising. The lion's share of our business education is focused on, like, the cruising. And we saw the opportunity was open in Sputnik. And can we find that people that for whatever reason want to stay in the geography, but can we bring to them what we understand how the unicorns are built, how the startups are built? How do you build it, how you build yourself, how you build your teams? It felt that Austin was ripe to do that. And that was the concept. That's what we do. Now, that was in 2018. Forward back, we have 72 investments. We have some of the spectacular startups. But that, and I think in some of the world have recognized right now Austin as one of the hubs for future innovation, one of the hubs for the startups. It is a lot easier to do things here. It's not yet easy. But people like us, people like a lot of colleagues here showing up and building this ecosystem together and investing in these startups, I think in 10 years, and as VCs will live 10 years in the future. So you have to make bets on what you think you want to have happen or what you think might be happening 10 years from now and build the little bricks and go there.
Oksana, what do you think would differentiate in the very early stage a company that has the potential to be a unicorn from a company that, yeah, it's a good idea, but
yeah, God, I wish everyone knew a precise answer, but I'll tell you how I think about this because it comes in many, many different variations. And it is, the space has to be big because if you understand the economics of early stage venture, if the space that people are playing in is not big and rapidly growing, the journey is just going to be really hard. And so one is, are you playing a space that is big and evolving? And that's kind of like the big thing. Can you convince yourself as an investor or as a founder that this is the space that could be a multi-billion-dollar space? Because then you have a fair chance of creating something that could be $1 billion business. And for those who are not venture investing junkies, reminder that unicorn in our parlor is the company that grew up to be a venture, $1 billion in valuation. So that's what it means. The second thing is for the founder and their domain knowledge. Do we believe that for whatever reason, this founder knows something about this space that other people don't understand? Sometimes this is referred to the secret sauce. Do you have something? What's your unfair advantage in the space as a person entering into the space? And those two considerations are really meaningful. But the early stage, it's mostly about the founders. You cannot ignore those two other things. But really, if you think about the lift up is so strong, all the odds are against you. And so do I see the person that I believe is passionate enough to go build this, gritty enough to withstand all the ups and downs, magnetic enough to build the team because you want to have the best people willingly follow that person? Some kind of combination of those things where you have to be simultaneously very confident that you could build that, but also you're early. So if you're confident but arrogant, that's not my type of founder because you have so much to learn that you don't even know what are the things you need to learn. If you come at this, I already know everything, then you are guaranteed to fail. And maybe there may be brilliant exceptions to that, right? But if you think about startup is about growth, the most important growth that will happen in the head of the founder.
That's such powerful messaging. What would a founder do if a founder is, let's say, they have an idea, but they're not confident? What would you say a founder should do to explore to determine whether or not they both have it in them or that the marketplace is ready for their idea? I mean, we've all seen ideas that were just premature. Had someone invented them 10 years later, it's not even a question that it would have been a takeoff, but
Yeah. There's a fantastic documentary for those listening that I highly recommend people listen to, watch. It's called General Magic. And it's about the company that essentially invented iPhone 15, 20 years before it was time. Best team, best everything. So sometimes you could be one of those people that comes to the market and discovers something that is too early. That could happen to you. That's not the biggest thing because you probably will learn a lot through the process. But most importantly, there are two questions. Is idea ready? And are you ready to take on this idea? Those two merit some serious contemplation. So let me tackle, are you ready? And I have a very distinct perspective on this one that is maybe unusual, but let me share like a framework that could help. I hope for all of our sakes that we've had a big love in our lives, a romantic love, where it doesn't matter if the person lives in New Zealand. It doesn't matter that the parents don't agree. Like nothing matters. To be with this person, you will get on the plane, you'll rearrange your life. You just feel that strongly about this person. For the sake of everyone out there, I hope you had that. And you will move mountains, it wouldn't matter. Because you see yourself as that person, that's your happiness, that's that, that you almost, the other world does not exist. To me, when you enter the startup track, my wish for every founder to feel that way about the company you are and the idea that you want to be. You need to think the strengths of conviction, the strengths of the gut feel, all of those things have to feel the very same way. Otherwise, statistically, you're better off taking a job and working in a job. It's very rare that amazing startups are built out of calculation, right? I want to get wealthy. I'm going to start a company. I'm going to do that. It may be in other settings it might work, but statistically, startups is such a risky endeavor, and the world spotlights only the biggest successes. But for every Elon Musk out there are a gazillion of people that have tried that, like fought a valiant battle and didn't win. And so if you feel about your idea as strongly as you have described, you're going to learn that's going to be joyful for you. You have a much higher ability to get through those tremendous ups and downs. And you're going to enjoy the process, whether you win or not. And that to me is like that's the mental litmus test. It works wonders.
Could you be in a state of joy and gratitude, maybe back to that as well, even if you were knowing you had a crystal ball, you would fail, but you would do it anyway?
Yeah. That I think is also like, if this does not succeed, like how would it make you feel? Would you learn something in the process? Would you become like, version 2.0, 3.0 of yourself? And I think that's a really strong, because you have to really want it. Sometimes it comes from the world is better off if this exists, and I'm the person to make it so. Sometimes the pain point is so strong that I cannot believe people didn't tackle that. And often the world does not believe you yet. Like, listen, for all of the startup founders that think this idea is crazy, I love the story of Airbnb. Like, imagine we go back to the inception, like two design majors that cannot make the ends meet in San Francisco, never started a business ever in their lives, with the concept of selling the room on their inflatable mattress. But they had a bigger vision. The rest of the world had not seen that, like working through that magic and just thinking like, when I talk to the beginner venture capitalist, or like one of the first things I talked to when my associate joined Sputnik, where we're not going to have crystal ball, and sometimes you will not know. And this is such a humbling reset. Would you have bet on them becoming a unicorn, so that you're not always right, but also for the entrepreneurs facing rejection? Some of the best of the entrepreneurs that went on to rule the world have been rejected by the best people in our profession. And if you want to go back to the space, I think like the best companies are always co-created with customers. And I think the best way to understand whether the world wants whatever you're bringing, when you start your company, you're going to make something, and then you're going to go and try to test it with people in the right way and see, is it the right product for whom it is the right product? What pain point is solving? And I think there is no other way. In addition to having huge imagination, most of the great companies are ultimately co-created with their customers.
Yes, it's interesting that you say that. Just yesterday, I saw Eric Schmidt talking about the next great set of companies. He said that whereas in the past, everyone was presenting their knowledge and selling their knowledge, today the great companies are aggregating knowledge. They may even pay a little bit for that knowledge, aggregating it, and then selling back a crowdsourced version of the aggregate knowledge. I thought that was an interesting way of looking at it as well, meaning like obviously nobody has a crystal ball, but the crowd seems to be more right than the individual on any given level. And the law of large numbers is true in large numbers. So it's interesting. It's thinking about that. Has there been any particular story that maybe a startup that took off that you can say that you understood from the beginning what they needed and maybe a particular way that you helped them become more successful or something like that?
I'm always hesitant to name particular startups because there's 70 and you highlight one company and then you're just like, oh, what about the rest of us, right?
Right. So
but I think
you don't.
yeah, but I think one of the things I like is the story of the success is rarely one heroic thing. It's almost never, oh wow, like I've had such a great idea and boom, wonderful things have happened. I think if we were to go back and look at our best startups, the ones that are consumed, because the journey up is so uneven. And you talk to any venture capitalist or you talk to any founder that had an exit, and the world wants a story where like I went from one victory to another and boom, and then there was $1 billion IPO. Great. I'll try to match that. And the reality is not like that at all. Professionally and personally, I am mega curious about people who build great businesses. And everyone has a rough journey. Everyone has like tremendous ups and downs. You do not know where they come from. For me, the first really great incarnation of that comes from one of the books that is at the end of the program that we sit with our startups, called The Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, Nike. And I've listened to that book on audio in a particularly difficult period in my life where somehow like all entrepreneurs know that you have ups and you downs. And there was I was just kind of like lower down there. And I was driving from San Francisco to San Diego. And I had some meetings, I think a meeting in San Obispo Valley. And so I said, okay, just going to drive and listen to that book. Fundamentally to the brand, Phil Knight had built one of the most admired brands out there. Unequivocally a successful entrepreneur that created something new and different that most of us get to enjoy. First of all, from him struggling and not needing to put his and his wife's house to back the banking accounts of the company, I think it's about 7 years. The other thing is for the first 12 years of existence, which we wrote about in Nike, there were at least 2 Armageddons. Every year. They would come from all different, from the supplier that is not doing this, from the partners, from the bank, from the government, from the, you name it, different. You don't know where they're coming from. And that journey was long, that journey was arduous. And coming back to a point, like the successful startups, the founders are really great about what's the process, what's my goal, and kind of re-anchoring yourself back to that point. And looking back at the Sputnik's portfolio, there are quite a few that are doing really great. And the common thread is they've trusted in the process, and when in doubt, they come back to the process that works and the people that have their back, right? And I think that's like if I were like to and because sometimes you could goof up your investor fundraise and you like, oh, like no one does. And okay, how do we know the right investment fundraise works? Did I do these things? Like one of the very successful companies had really struggled in their first fundraise after Sputnik. And we looked at them where the founder was telling us, well, I've spent my last 2 months working and like meeting with investors and no one is writing me a check. I said, well, let's double click on that. Let's show me your calendar, show me the people you're meeting with. And what we discover is they were meeting with people that were technically called investors, but maybe he did not do enough research. Do they invest at my stage? Do they invest in my industry? Do they have money to invest? Because some people will call themselves an investor, but they are at the tail end of the fund and they simply don't have the bandwidth to write it down. It does not sound good. And so, and in double clicking on his investment journey, he went at us at the right intensity, but he went at that with the wrong crowd. So he talked with intensity to people that if you were to put probability of any one of the people that they've met with funding them, that would have never happened. And so coming back and talking through that process and course correcting had led to successful outcomes. And that one of the most resilient founders, because that lesson also taught them to, let's come back to the process. What do we know about this world? How do you double check your actions with people who've been there and done that? And I think that the stories like this are abundant, as in, when in doubt, what do you do? Because people are going to go, the most successful companies will go up and down for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, I can only speak from my experience as an entrepreneur as well. You learn a lot on the way up. You learn probably much more on the way down. It is, as you mentioned before, incredibly humbling journey, because you think, oh, I know everything there is to know about doing XYZ, and then at the end of the day you discover that many of the assumptions that you took as gospel have been eroded or changed. And you and I think when we spoke the last time, we were talking a little bit about I don't want to call it spirituality, but maybe like something like that. And, the governing energy of the universe, if you will. And the governing energy of the universe, I think, is incredibly benevolent. And we're learning on the up and we learn on the down. And maybe it does come back to that gratitude that you spoke about earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. That is like that. Yeah. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And most people that are great startup founders, they find a way, they find a way to nurture that. Because what I think I want to, I'm glad that we talked that I'm a physicist, because what I'm about to tell you next might come as a surprise. But in having worked with entrepreneurs for the past 10 years, I know with certainty, beyond reasonable doubt, that we bring living energy into our businesses. The businesses do not come to exist and thrive because you wrote something on a piece of paper. The businesses exist and thrive because one person, two people, three people have chosen to bring a piece of their soul to make this creation. And it is very meaningful. Also, interestingly, it's not unexhaustible. So often, when the companies fail, and that happens, the superficial reasons that are often given are they didn't find the product market fit, they didn't raise their round, they were in the wrong market. And you go, you get the gist. But asking 3 or 4 whys, you usually discover that the person who was bringing his or her living energy into this business got too tired. They could not, they no longer have the fight. They did not, in fighting for the business, they forgot to protect that light within them that was actually bringing this energy into the business, and they've drained it over time. By being cavalier with their health, by being cavalier with their mental health, by being cavalier with the true friends that are going to have their back, that not just going to tell them, oh, you're just being a moron right now. I cannot believe you just said or did that. By being cavalier with their life partners and not explaining to them how they are, which is very different from how most people are, is important to you and makes you. And in the end, those things, by being cavalier and taking for granted the relationship with their business partner, Uh, and a lot of other things like that, that at the end of the day are very, very human things that require attention. And it's, if you talk to an experienced investor, we all have seen those cases where the companies know more, not because the idea was bad, not because the founder didn't have it in the moment, but because people have not taken care of their inner beings and didn't allow their inner beings be their whole inner beings. It didn't allow their inner beings to grow to the level that the business had required. And I think that sounds very, I don't know,
California. I'm kidding.
California, yeah, maybe California, yeah. Go on. It sounds utterly unscientific. Let me put it this way. Yet, if you are in the business, you absolutely gonna see that. That no questions about that. And so, one of the things we do at Sputnik when we work with our portfolio companies, yes, like I could publish the curriculum, and we're gonna teach you absolutely. Okay, this is how you talk to your customer. This is how you talk to your investor. This is how you do blah blah blah. But I think privately there is a lot of dialogue. Here is how you preserve your living energy. This is why, like, going for a walk or for a workout, carving some time, because you're going to be working most of the time. There is no such thing as work-life balance when you're startupping, but there is such thing as work-life intention, and there is such thing as being intentional about protecting the, similar to you needing to be judicious with the capital you have. You have to be judicious with the living capital that is inside you, because if you do not replenish it, you're going to come to the place where there is no more of it left. And it could manifest itself in a disastrous things like your health is failing, your marriage is failing, your, like whatever that is. And you just wake up and one day you just lifeless. And that person that you let yourself become, that sap that out, you stop being magnetic. You stop being able to look at the world with abundance. You stopped. Your customers will feel it. Your investors will feel it. It's going to have a cascading effect of negative outcomes that will be very hard to unwind. And so taking care of what's in here and here by having a coach, having a therapist, having a group of friends, all of those softer things are just as important to the success of your startup as a good technology and being in the right space.
Yeah, I mean, it really sounds like taking care of the inner you. I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is the inner you, if it's not fed and cared for, is going to ultimately extinguish. And it's as an entrepreneur, I hear you. It 100% resonates with me. It's a little scary, frankly, but it's very true. So,
yeah. Do you have what do you do? Because you're an entrepreneur, you talk to a lot of really successful people. What is in your personal toolkit? Haven't talked that. Like, I'm curious as to what's there. Like, how do you replenish your living energy?
I have that same question for you, but I will tell you.
Okay. Yeah.
And we'll talk about that. I'll say that for me, I'm not good about exercise and things like that. I work way too many hours for that. But I will say that if I'm not meditating on the regular, I don't show up with my best self. And I know, again, that sounds hokey, but, and this really runs full circle around a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. I lose the gratitude. I start being more argumentative. I start thinking that I know more than I do, and I stop getting curious. And I start being more arrogant. More ego comes into play. And what winds up happening is that, to be truthful and incredibly vulnerable, it creates a lot of self-sabotage. So that's how I would answer that question. But what about you? What do you do, Oksana?
God, a lot of the similar things. My morning routine in many ways an indication of whether I will have a good day. And I know what a great morning routine looks like, and I know what's not such a good morning routine looks like. So to me, meditation is definitely part of it. reflection and journaling. So there is this tool I recommend. It's super easy. It's like about $20 on Amazon, and I've recommended them so many times that I should be getting commissions from them. It's called the Panda Journal. And what I know is that Panda Daily Journal is when I write to this, when I'm the kind of person that needs to have 15, 20 minutes to myself before my world around me wakes up. I'm a working mom, and I think, like there is a busyness to the morning that has to do with getting the kids out and like things like that. But the mornings where I've woken up 15, 20 minutes earlier and meditated and also wrote in the journal, Panda Journal, those are without a doubt much better days than when I don't. And that's my self-savior mode. The other thing that happens to me is because I like to pack my days. I love to live my world. I like to live my life with intensity. And I'm sometimes ridiculously stupid about overloading it. So one of my challenges for the next 3 to 6 months is building pockets of nothingness in my day, because that's when, and it's like not feeling guilty about having those pockets of nothingness, because as a CEO, as a managing partner, my most important job is to think. My most important job is to absorb the world and understand how to work with that. And there is the trap of the false productivity when you have your day jam-packed from 7 in the morning until 10 in the evening, and then you collapse. At my age, like, I used to be able to go longer than that. Now, like, physically, if I have that day, I probably will just like crash. And so to me, my next challenge is, where could I have a moment of nothingness? It could be a 30-minute walk without any audio stimuli. It could be just sitting and looking in the lake, or like just like far away and daydreaming. Some pockets of nothingness where I allow my brain to process and I allow myself to redefine that. I think that's my personal challenge, because I like to be busy. Busy gives me a sense of false security and self-importance, but that's a false assumption. And the last thing for me is, and this is the intention of this, the reason I work with startups are about the growth, and startups is about the growth in your head, and that goes for me as well. So being intentional about carving some time to be with people that are better than me in something, and seeking those micro crowds, because they're not crowds. I'm a shy extrovert, so like they cannot be many, but being with the people, and sometimes like surprise where sometimes those people are younger than me, sometimes those people are older than me, but being very intentional about having space in my life to have that allows me to show up and get reborn at a higher vibration.
Wow.
The next day.
Wow, that is unreal. I will just zoom in on 1 second on one thing that you said before. You said that you look for quietness and you look for pockets of quiet. And, that completely resonates, because in meditation, the living energy is found in stillness. And that was just, it really spoke to the issue that we spoke about before, meaning like, if you're trying to recharge that living energy, finding that quiet without stimulation and avoiding the fake trappings of me telling myself I'm productive, therefore I am good, which is such a crazy argument. And yet I think, all successful entrepreneurs have to kind of like deal with that pendulum quite a bit. Wow, thank you. That was really, really, really well said. Thank you. Can I ask you just, before we wrap up, what do you see as, what do you see as some of the big markets that people who are entrepreneurial that they may want to go ahead and get themselves into? Like, what is your prediction? 2, 3, 5 years out, that would be a good place to get into.
Wow. There are several thoughts, and I think the first thing is you have to, as an entrepreneur, you have to examine yourself as well as the markets, because I think we're going to see a lot of innovation and real strong value at being created in adding modern tools. And I think the one that comes to mind is AI. I guarantee you there will be very few AI venture funds, but as a tool, bringing that to the industry whose problems you understand deeply. So that it's not, because I think many people are attempting to create new models, and someone should do that, but maybe not everyone. I think that there will be, I think in many ways that market is going to be with a few winners and a lot of the road to nowhere. But there will be, going back like in the gold rush, people that were selling picks and shovels were the biggest winners. And bringing new technologies, whatever that might be, to the industries and spaces that have not been touched with innovation, but carry a lot of like things we touch every day. I think I'm always will be very excited about that. Another big direction I see, there is, I'm mega excited about the overlap of AI and biology. And even though we have not made any investments, as I read and think about that, I don't know whether like at Sputnik we will be equipped or not to handle that. But I think as a humanity, helping the new tools that you learn in AI just help us discover new cures and new ways to become health. Because in coming back to the living body and the living energy, we are seeing LLMs being deployed to like do molecular discovery and drug discovery and new ways to cure, like profound new drugs, if you will, profound new protocols, profound customization of the wellness protocol combined with Internet of Things. I think that's a spectacular new frontier that we're going to see a lot of innovation happen. And obviously, we have to be very careful because you very easily could ethical boundaries, let me put it this way, have to be thought about seriously and profoundly as people go there. But for me, that's a really huge area of innovation. And I think the third thing, and we're seeing a lot more of that, is we've created a lot in the digital world, but I think there is a lot to be innovated in the area of like things we could touch, material science. And I'm excited to see more of those startups coming about because we still live in the physical world. And that is hopefully is not going to change. Like while we create this new and spectacular digital world, the physical world have been orphaned with our attention and is ripe for many innovations.
Oh, fascinating. I love that. Are there any passion projects that you'd like to share with the listeners?
What I've discovered, and I'm really not really great at that because I don't have a good tune, but I've been singing a lot in the car, and I may take some singing lessons just because it brings me joy for no other reason than that.
I love that.
And that I think is had been my secret passion project that stopped being secret starting now.
There's some great coaches online and YouTube that you can find that teach you all kinds of vocal exercises. You can hear I'm fairly raspy. So over the years, I've worked hard to try and be able to sing without getting and completely losing my voice. And
I would love to know who you're looking at because that's a new exercise for me. I've stopped at the extent of my exercises was doing some karaoke or like shutting down the podcast I listen to and just yelling out when no one hears. So I think that's where I've been.
It's so cathartic to do that. You feel just like unburdened. I don't know why. It's amazing. But Oksana, thank you so much. This was really unbelievable. I learned so much from you. Thank you for sharing so much of your wisdom. If there are any people who are inspired by today's conversation and want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you and learn more about Sputnik or any of the other things that you're working on?
Well, we are online at sputnikatx.com. I am Oksana at sputnikatx.com. My email is not so secret. If you could spell Oksana, you could find me online. And also obviously on LinkedIn. looking forward to hearing, because my passion is to help entrepreneurs, and I'm trying to do this in a variety of ways, both through my social media. I'm also on, I could provide with all the social moniker. Oksana at ATX is my Instagram moniker, which is where I show up in a slightly more personable way, as opposed to LinkedIn as normal. You see more of my professional alter ego. And I try really hard, because in reality, those two are really blended. So I'm trying to show up with integrity of true being to who I am on both of those platforms. But would love to hear from people, and we would help, because we are committed to helping entrepreneurs. Sputnik translates as partner. And I think in a way, I want to say, Sputnik, my American born and bred business partner have actually came up with a name, not me, but there's a lot in the name, because on the one hand, Sputnik had showed us as a humankind that we could operate at the higher trajectory, which is the mission of what's written on my whiteboard. And our team member knows our mission is to help people operate at their higher potential on the one hand. On the other hand, the secondary meaning is we're going to be partner with you. You're not alone in your journey. And every company we invest in, we're going to be their partner in the journey of finding their better selves. And I guess that's a little thing about us, and the rest is on our website and social.
Thank you, Oksana. This is really, really great. On that note of partnership and growth and gratitude, Ventures and Visionaries is really grateful to be sponsored by KJ Technology. KJ Technology is a unique business. It enables businesses to function. Their technology advisory, cybersecurity, and proactive process solutions are designed to solve your real world challenges. For a complimentary consultation call, please call 646-556-6500 or email info@kjtechnology.com. And again, Oksana, thank you so much. This was really a lot of fun. Thank you.